My name is Hilda, and I am 68 years old. This afternoon I was in my kitchen, the warm scent of cinnamon and baked apples filling the air. I was wrapping up my famous apple pie, the one my Walter loved to take to my son David's house for our weekly dinner. I tucked the dish into my basket, my heart feeling that familiar, hopeful flutter. I told myself it would be fine, just like always, even though the last few visits had left a quiet, cold feeling in my chest that lingered for days. Before I tell you about that particular dinner, I am curious to know where you are listening from right now. Are you in your own kitchen, maybe with something in the oven? Or are you cozy on your couch? If stories about family, quiet strength, and finding your voice later in life speak to you, I would be so honored if you would join our community here. Please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you do not miss what comes next. Now let me take you back to that evening. I drove across town, the familiar streets giving way to the newer, wider lanes of the Oakcrest subdivision where David and his family lived. The houses here stood tall and proud, with manicured lawns that looked more like carpets than grass. My little sedan felt out of place. I pulled into their long driveway, the stone facade of their home imposing under the soft evening light. I took a deep breath, smoothed my simple blue cardigan, and grabbed my basket. The door swung open before I could even ring the bell. Grandma Lily, my 8-year-old granddaughter, launched herself at my waist, her arms tight around me. That hug was a burst of pure sunshine. "I missed you. Did you bring pie?" she whispered. "I sure did, my sweet girl," I whispered back, kissing the top of her head. Then David appeared behind her. "Hey, Mom." He gave me a brief, stiff hug. He smelled like his expensive cologne and faintly of stress. "Come on in." His smile did not quite reach his eyes. I stepped into the foyer, the chill of the marble floor seeping through my shoes. The house was stunning, all clean lines and muted grays, but it always felt like a museum to me, not a home filled with life. Serena descended the staircase slowly, as if making an entrance. She held her phone in one hand. "Hilda," she said with a nod, her voice cool. "David the sommelier just confirmed the delivery. The Pinot Noir should be decanted for at least an hour." She finally looked at my basket. "What did you bring this time?" "Just an apple pie, dear, from the tree in my backyard." She offered a thin smile. "How quaint. Lily, remember what we talked about. Refined sugar is a toxin. We will have a very small taste for manners." She gestured for me to follow her into the vast stainless steel kitchen. My pottery pie dish looked absurdly homesick sitting on the immense quartz island. The afternoon unfolded in that familiar awkward pattern. We sat in the stark white living room. Serena talked almost exclusively about her recent wellness retreat, the cost of resodding the backyard, and her new designer handbag. It was an investment piece, of course, she said, glancing at my sensible leather purse on the floor. David mostly nodded, interjecting with a "yes, dear," or "sure." I tried to bridge the gap. "David, how is that woodworking project you were thinking about? You know, the birdhouse for Lily." He had always loved working with his hands, a trait he got from his father. He shifted in his chair. "Oh, that. No time, Mom. Work's been crazy." Serena chuckled lightly. "David's priorities are with his career and this family now, Hilda. Childhood hobbies are for children." The way she said childhood felt like a dismissal of his entire past, a past that included me. Later, as I helped set the table for a simple lunch of salads Serena had ordered in, I heard her voice hushed but sharp, carrying from the walk and pantry. "She always brings this homemade stuff. It's so rustic. And she uses that same basket every time. It looks like something from a flea market." I froze a salad plate in my hand. I did not hear David's response, just a low murmur. The cold feeling in my chest deepened, solidifying into a hard, heavy lump. That night, back in my own quiet house, I scrolled through photos on my phone, pictures of David as a boy, covered in sawdust in Walter's garage, beaming next to a lopsided birdhouse. The man in that expensive house felt like a stranger. The cold feeling from Oakcrest took days to thaw. It was my neighbor and dear friend Eleanor who finally brought the sun out. I was pruning my rose bushes, the thorns catching on my gloves, when her voice sailed over the fence. "You look like you're wrestling with more than those roses, Hilda. Spill it." Eleanor is 72, a widow like me, but where I tended to turn inward, she faced the world head-on. I told her about the visit, about the pie comment, about David's silence. She listened, leaning on her rake. "Honey, that's not quaint. "That's cruel," she said finally. And David just sat there. "That boy needs a spine transplant." Her bluntness was a relief. It validated the hurt I kept trying to minimize. Over glasses of iced tea on my porch, more memories surfaced, things I had brushed aside. There was my last birthday. Serena had presented me with a gift card to a luxurious day spa. "You could use a little pampering, Hilda," she'd said loudly in front of the small gathering. "Those wrinkles are getting deep." The room had gone quiet. David had just stared into his drink. Then there was the time just a few months ago when they'd asked me to watch Lily for a full week while they took a last-minute trip to Cabo. "It would mean the world to us, Mom," David had said, sounding genuinely strained. I was happy to have Lily, of course. We had a wonderful time baking cookies and reading stories. But when they returned tanned and laden with souvenirs, there was no thank you gift, not even a proper dinner to relieve me. Serena had simply said, "We knew you'd handle it. You're not busy." I had felt less like a grandmother and more like a convenient unpaid service. But the most unsettling event came a few weeks later. David had come over alone, looking nervous. He'd fidgeted on my sofa, talking in circles about property values and smart planning for the future. Finally, he'd blurted it out. "Serena thought it would be wise for me to consider selling my house. It's too much for you to maintain, Mom. We could help you find a lovely senior apartment community, more social, you know, and we could help manage the proceeds for you." The words had felt like ice water down my back. This was my home. Every corner held a memory of Walter. The garden we planted together, the porch swing where we'd spent countless evenings. I had looked at my son, my only child, and seen a man trapped. I'd said no, my voice firmer than I'd felt. He hadn't pushed, just looked relieved the conversation was over. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Was I seen as a burden? A financial opportunity? I shared all this with Eleanor. "They're trying to put you in a storage unit, Hilda," she said flatly. "Don't you dare sell. You plant your feet right here in this soil." The phone call came on a Tuesday. David's voice was oddly formal, laced with a tension I couldn't quite place. "Mom, we'd like to have you over for a proper dinner this Saturday. Serena's planning something special." My heart, ever hopeful where my son was concerned, gave a little leap. Maybe this was an olive branch. Maybe my quiet sadness had finally gotten through to him. "That sounds lovely, David. It's going to be a really nice evening," he added, almost like he was convincing himself. She wanted to get a reservation at the Grove, but we decided to have a private chef come to the house instead, more intimate. After I hung up, I wrestled with what to do. Show up empty-handed. That felt wrong. Bring another pie, that felt like setting myself up for another quaint remark. Then I remembered the set of glasses. In my china cabinet was a box containing 6 crystal coupe glasses. They were not wildly expensive, but they were beautiful, delicate, with a subtle cut star pattern. Walter had found them at an estate sale decades ago. "For our fancy drinks, Hildy," he'd said with a wink. "We'd use them for every anniversary toast." They symbolized love, tradition, a shared history. I decided I would give them to David and Serena, a tangible piece of our family's story, hoping it might remind David of where he came from. The price tag at the local antique store for a similar set made me catch my breath. My pension was steady, but modest. Yet thinking of Walter's smile, I wrote the check. When I showed Eleanor, she sighed. "Hilda, you have a heart of gold, but you're bringing a family heirloom to a knife fight. Just be careful." Saturday arrived. I took extra care wearing my best navy dress, the one with the little white polka dots. I felt a nervous flutter as I drove. The house in Oakcrest was lit up like a jewel box. A caterer's van was parked in the driveway. Inside, the atmosphere was one of controlled chaos. A man in a white chef's coat was bustling in the kitchen. Serena was directing him, dressed in a sleek emerald green dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. "The seer must be perfect, chef." "We're talking about Wagyu," she said imperiously. "Hello, Serena." "David," I said. "Hilda." "You can put your coat in the den," Serena said without looking away from the chef. David gave me a quick, tense hug. "Hey, Mom, you look nice." I presented the carefully wrapped box. "I brought a little something for you both." Serena finally turned, taking the box with a curious expression. She opened it, lifted one glass by the stem, and held it up to the light. Vintage. They'll look interesting on the display shelf in the study." She placed it back in the box and set it aside on a console table. "Thank you." The dismissal was complete. Just then, a puff of white fur trotted into the room. Pierre, their spoiled bichon frise, wore a tiny blue sweater. He yapped at my feet. "Careful," Hilda Serena said with a laugh that wasn't kind. "Pierre's sweater costs more than your handbag." Another little cut, another reminder of my place. David looked at the floor. The stage was set, and I was beginning to understand my role was not that of an honored guest. Dinner was announced. The dining table, usually empty, was extravagantly set with multiple forks, knives gleaming under the crystal chandelier. We took our seats, David at the head, Serena to his right, me to his left, and Lily across from me, looking small and wide-eyed. The first courses came and went, a tiny soup that was more foam than substance, a salad with edible flowers. Conversation was stilted, revolving around Serena's opinions on the wine pairings and the chef's pedigree. I made another attempt to reach my son. "David, do you remember that old black-and-white movie we used to love, The Court Jester? They're showing it at the Classic Film Festival next week. It was a silly, joyful memory of us laughing together on the couch." He gave a vague smile. "Oh yeah, maybe." Serena smoothly intercepted. "David's schedule is packed with client dinners, Hilda, and we're curating Lily's media exposure very carefully. Old comedies aren't really part of the educational matrix." She spoke as if I'd suggested something mildly dangerous. Then the main course arrived. The chef presented each plate with a flourish. Before David, Serena, and even Lily, he placed magnificent thick cuts of steak seared a perfect brown, resting in a dark red wine reduction. The aroma was rich and savory. My mouth watered instinctively. Then he placed a plate in front of me. On it was a small, pale piece of steamed fish. It looked like cod, with a few limp spears of asparagus and plain, unseasoned quinoa. It was the visual definition of an afterthought. I stared at it, confused. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Serena smiled, her practiced, placating smile. "Oh, we thought with your simpler palate and your blood pressure, the steak might be too rich. All that fat. This is a much healthier option for someone your age. Chef prepared it specially." She said someone your age as if it were a medical condition. I felt the heat of humiliation rush to my face. I looked at David. He was staring at his own magnificent steak, his jaw tight, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He did not look at me. He did not say a word. The message was deafeningly clear. In this house, at this table, I was less than. My dietary needs, imagined by Serena, relegated me to the sidelines. Pierre, smelling the feast, had stationed himself by Serena's chair, whining softly. The next few minutes passed in a blur of quiet agony. I picked at the bland fish, each bite like ash in my mouth. The conversation continued around me, but it was just noise. Serena was holding court, criticizing the sommelier's choice, though she'd ordered it herself. My heart was pounding, not from blood pressure, but from a rising tide of grief and fury. 68 years of life, 45 years of marriage, raising a son, building a home, all reduced to this moment, chewing flavorless fish while being treated like a nuisance. Serena cut a large piece of her steak, took a bite, and made a theatrical sigh of disappointment. "Chef, this is slightly overcooked. I requested a true medium rare. This is pushing medium." She pushed the remaining piece of the cut, a generous, still pink-centered portion, to the very edge of her plate with obvious distaste. Pierre's whining intensified. He nudged her leg. The chef, looking flustered, apologized. Serena waved a dismissive hand. She then turned her head and looked directly at me. Her eyes were bright with a cold, superior amusement. She smiled a wide, deliberate smile, and in a voice loud enough for everyone at the table, David, Lily, the chef, hovering nearby, to hear, she spoke. "Don't worry about that, Hilda." She gestured with her fork toward the rejected, expensive piece of meat on her plate. "If Pierre doesn't want it, you can have it. You'll eat whatever the dog doesn't finish. It's still perfectly good." Silence. A complete vacuum-sealed silence swallowed the room. The chef froze. Lily's eyes went as round as saucers, her gaze darting between her mother and me. David finally moved his head, snapped up his face, draining of all color. He looked at his wife as if seeing a ghost. In that silence, something inside me broke. But it was not a shattering into pieces. It was a breaking open, a release. All the months of subtle digs, the years of condescension, the erosion of my son's presence, the attempt to take my home, it all crystallized into a single diamond-sharp point of clarity. The coldness in my chest evaporated, replaced by a terrifying absolute calm. I looked at the prize steak on Serena's plate. I looked at the pampered dog salivating beside her. I looked at her smug, expectant face, and I knew with every fiber of my being that I would never accept this, not for one more second. With a serenity that seemed to belong to someone else, I placed my fork and knife neatly on the edge of my plate. The soft clink was shockingly loud in the quiet room. I slowly pushed my chair back and stood up. Every eye followed me. I felt like I was moving through deep water. I walked the few steps to Serena's side of the table. I could feel her confused, then indignant stare. I did not look at her. I looked at the piece of $80 Wagyu beef abandoned at the rim of her plate. I picked up my own unused dinner fork, reached over, and speared the steak cleanly. I held it aloft for a brief moment. Then I bent down, placed the fork on the floor right in front of Pierre, and said in a gentle, clear tone, "Here you go, Pierre. Bon appetit." The dog needed no second invitation. He pounced, gulping down the exquisite piece of meat in 2 joyous bites, his tail wagging furiously. The reaction was instantaneous. Serena exploded from her chair with a shriek that could have cracked glass. "No, my steak that was $80, Pierre. No, bad dog. Spit it out." She was hysterical, her face contorted in rage, pointing a shaking finger at the happily chewing dog. David remained frozen in his seat, a statue of shock. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. He looked from his screaming wife to me, his eyes wide with disbelief. A tiny choked giggle escaped from Lily before she clapped both hands over her mouth. Serena whirled on me, her composure utterly shattered. "Are you insane? How dare you? That was mine. You fed my steak to the dog." I stood up to my full height, which suddenly felt taller than it ever had. I turned to face her fully. My hands were steady at my sides. I looked past her fury, right into her eyes, and when I spoke, my voice was low, calm, and carried a weight that settled over the entire wreckage of the dinner. "You assigned me the dog's place at this table." I said each word deliberate and clear. "I was merely following your seating chart." The truth of it hung in the air, undeniable. Serena's mouth opened and closed, but her outrage had no counter to that simple statement. She had said the quiet part out loud, and I had simply acted on it. David finally found his voice. It was not directed at me. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly. "For God's sake, Serena, that's enough," he roared. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice to her, and the shock of it silenced her more than my words had. I did not wait for the next act. The performance was over. I calmly picked up my linen napkin, folded it, and placed it on the table beside my untouched fish. I walked to Lily, leaned down, and kissed her forehead. "Good night, my sweet," I whispered. Then I collected my purse from the den, took my coat, and walked to the front door. "Mom, wait!" David called, his voice strangled. I paused at the threshold and looked back at him. The anger was gone from my face, replaced by a deep, profound sadness. "No, David," I said softly. "I've waited long enough. Good night." And I closed the door quietly behind me, leaving the chaos inside. The drive home was surreal. My hands trembled slightly on the wheel, but inside I felt an eerie, powerful calm. The shell of polite acceptance I had lived in for years had been cracked open, and I had stepped out. I did not feel triumphant. I felt raw, real, and strangely free. The first thing I did was call Eleanor. "You will not believe what just happened," I said, and I told her everything. There was a long pause on the line, and then she burst out laughing, a deep, hearty, cathartic laugh. "It's about damn time, Hilda. You showed her the blueprint. I'm so proud of you." The fallout was swift. David called 3 times that night. I let it go to voicemail. His first message was a jumbled mess of, "Mom, I'm so sorry, and Serena is just upset. And why did you do that?" The old Hilda would have called back, soothed him, absorbed the blame. The new Hilda listened deleted and went to bed in her own quiet house and slept more soundly than I had in months. The next day, a long, venomous text arrived from Serena listing my offenses: disrespect, wastefulness, cruelty to an animal by feeding it steak no less, and sabotage of a special evening. I did not respond. Giving her words any energy felt like a step backward. A few days later, I sat down at my own kitchen table, the one Walter had built, and I wrote a letter. It was short, and I wrote it with care. I addressed it to David and Serena. I stated that after the events of the dinner, I would be taking a significant step back from visits and family gatherings. I wrote that while I loved my son and granddaughter dearly, I could no longer participate in a dynamic where my dignity was negotiable and my presence was tolerated as a courtesy. I said that true family respects one another and that I had realized enabling disrespect was not an act of love, but of fear. I did not demand an apology. I simply stated my new boundary. I signed it, with love and with hope for healthier days ahead, Mom, Hilda. I mailed it. It felt like planting a flag. In the weeks that followed, I began my own healing. I immersed myself in my garden pruning and planting with a new sense of purpose. I joined the local library's book club and found myself laughing with women my age about more than just plot points. I started a project I'd put off for years, a handwritten recipe book. Not just instructions, but the stories behind them. Walter's favorite chili, with a note about the time he used too much cayenne. Lily's first birthday cake with a smudge of frosting I'd never had the heart to clean. I was curating my own history for myself and for Lily for whenever she might need it. About a month after the dinner on a rainy Thursday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. It was David. He stood on my porch alone, soaked and looking utterly lost. I let him in. He broke down in my living room, great heaving sobs of shame and regret. He apologized, truly, apologized not for me, but for himself, for his silence, his cowardice, for allowing the woman he loved to diminish the mother who loved him. It was a hard, painful conversation. I did not absolve him. I listened. I told him I loved him, always would, but that love now had new fences around it, fences called respect and honesty. We cried together for what was broken and for what might, with time and effort, be mended differently. Things are not perfect. They may never be. Serena and I are cordial now in the way two distant countries might be aware of each other respecting borders. The power balance shifted that night. She knows the woman who will quietly feed her steak to the dog is not the woman who will be quietly managed into a senior apartment. David visits me more often alone. We talk about real things, sometimes awkwardly but honestly. He is trying. I see glimpses of the boy who loved woodworking. Now, as I sit on my porch swing with Eleanor watching the fireflies rise from my garden at dusk, I understand the lesson that dinner taught me. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and even for your child, is to show them what dignity looks like when it stands up from the table and quietly walks away. You teach people how to treat you not by what you ask for, but by what you are no longer willing to accept. And that starts with refusing to eat the scraps, literal or otherwise, from anyone's table. My story does not end with a magical reconciliation or a grand revenge. It ends with me, Hilda, 68 years old, in my own home with my own peace. And that I have found is more than enough. I have shared a very personal chapter of my life with you, a story about finding my voice when I thought it was too late. I wonder, have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? How did you find the courage? I would be so grateful if you would share your thoughts or a story of your own in the comments below. It means the world to me to connect with you. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like. It lets me know these conversations matter. And if you are not yet part of our community of brave hearts and quiet strength, I warmly invite you to hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening, for your kindness, and for being here. May you always have the strength to honor your own place at the table. Good night, friends.